shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Last week, the scriptures put us right in the middle of the law. And the more time we spent with the scriptures, the more clear it was that Jesus was putting the law on steroids. And in doing so, several things happen. First of all, we find out where the boundaries are. And that Jesus reminds us that we don't live up to those boundaries, and that we're absolutely dependent upon God's grace and God's mercy. But above all, Jesus reminds us that the law isn't about do's and don'ts and marking the form correctly. The law is about being in right relationship with one another. So today we get a whole bunch more law. And in fact, today Jesus turns the heat up a little bit more, because today Jesus is calling us into absolutely radical relationships. Jesus is calling us to be reconciled with evildoers, with those who persecute us, and with our enemy. Can you think of a rougher group of people to be called to be into relationship with? One of my colleagues this week was talking about doing a study with a group of people. And in the study he did with his group of people, he read the entire Sermon on the Mount, so Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And he read it, and the group of people were silent, oppressively silent. So finally he says to them, well, what do you think? And a woman in the group says, well, Jesus is just wrong about that. He said in his 40 years of ministry, he'd never had anybody tell Jesus was wrong. But the reality is, though, when we don't listen, or when we don't really believe there is merit in what Jesus has to say, are we not a bit like that woman who is saying, at least by our actions and our attitudes, that Jesus really doesn't know what he's talking about? This whole business of being in relationship with the other has been a struggle from the beginning of time, and in our current media and social media, we can see how difficult it is. But there is a word for it. It's called xenophobia, fear or hatred of the other, of someone who's not like me, doesn't think like me, act like me, look like me. And of course, it's been around since the beginning of time. That's why Jesus is speaking about it. There's a man who works for the Historical Society in Mount Angel. And not so long ago, he had a family come in and say, asking him to research his ancestors. And they lived just a half a mile outside of Mount Angel. And so he researched and researched and researched and couldn't find anything in the entire Historical Society about these ancestors. So he asked the family a few more questions. Well, as it turned out, they were Norwegian. The early settlers in Mount Angel were German Catholic. The Norwegian Protestants came over to Silverton, and they did indeed find the historical information in the Silverton Historical Society. And of course, it goes on and on. Last month on BBC, there was an article about a town in Hungary, a little town in Hungary, and they were advertising for people to immigrate to their wee little town in Hungary. However, they only wanted people that looked like them, sounded like them, thought like them, and believed like them. Not too far from Lake Titicaca in Peru are these pre-Incan burial chambers. Now, when the Incas came along, they looked at these pre-Incan burial chambers and they said, wow, those are really cool. Now, the Incans were brilliant And they had an amazing ability to build on what societies previous to they had done. And they looked at these and apparently discovered that that's where they had buried their royalty and the royalty's family and whatever the royalty would need for the next life. But the Incans looked at these and they said, we can do that. So they put their heads together and they created their blocks. These are about 2 stories high. They created their blocks and they made their very own burial chamber. But not long after they created it, there was an earthquake. And this is what happened to the Inca burial chamber, while the pre-Incan burial chambers still stood. So the Incans did a little bit more research and figured out what they'd done wrong. When they had built theirs, they had chosen the blocks same. The pre-Incans had varieties of blocks. So when the earth shifted, the variety of blocks allowed it flexibility. Is the same not true with what it means to be the kingdom of God? It's not about same, but it's about place for variety. It's about place for many voices and many faces. Desmond Tutu put it this way: when we see others as the enemy, we risk becoming what we hate. When we oppress others, we end up oppressing ourselves. And all of our humanity is dependent upon recognizing the humanity in the other. From Hebrews, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. It is not our job to bring in the kingdom of God. Not only is it not our job, we're not capable of it. But it is our call to believe that Jesus is bringing that kingdom of God. And that kingdom of God includes all of God's beloved. So on this day, we are reminded that the very centerpiece of what it means to follow Jesus is about reconciliation. A God who will come to us to be in radical relationship. And out of that radical relationship calls us to be in relationship with others, including the stranger and our enemy.
Well, this light of mine